Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Mirrorless Revolution. So we've got a wonderful panel of Sony artisans and here to speak to you tonight about their experiences with mirrorless cameras. And we've got Kenta Honjo there to answer all the hard questions we don't know the answers to. So feel free to try to stump him. You will not be successful. But the format tonight, we want each of the artisans to share about 10 minutes of their work, something in terms of what they're doing, and let you get a little more familiar with images, because we're going to talk gear, but it always comes back to what you can actually do with the gear. So it's my great pleasure to kick this off on a high note with my very dear friend, Katrin Eismann, who I'm sure all of you at SVA know, but for the rest of the folks, one of the best people in digital imaging in the world, plus she runs a master's program and just multitasker. So come right up here and show some work, darling.
Okay, hi everybody. I know it's a great week for photographers here in New York City. Before I start, I want to let you know that we have a special preview of our thesis exhibition, which the reception is actually tomorrow. After the talk, you're welcome to go down and see the exhibition. A number of the artists are in the room. No wine tonight. If you want wine and Trader Joe's nuts, you have to come back tomorrow. Okay. On that note, it's a privilege for me to be here. Thank you, Kayla. And I want to talk a little bit about how I use the Sony cameras, what I do with them. And this is what I do. I literally get up early in the morning, no matter where I am, and photograph what's in front of me. And then what I usually do is I transfer it wirelessly to my iPhone for processing and sharing. And that's really what I want to talk about. No matter where I am, I get up early in the morning to photograph what's ever in front of me. I'm very lucky. People say, oh, you take great pictures. It's like, no, I just stand in front of beautiful things. So I'm very lucky. This is a great example of what I do with the Sony Alpha. The last time I checked, my iPhone does not have a 200mm lens. And so, if I tried to do this with the iPhone, that would be, one mush. So I really like taking advantage of it. I do get to travel quite a bit, not as much as Ben Lowy, but you have to do, the window shots, because those movies are they're always repeats. And so I just enjoy photographing wherever I am. I am doing all the wireless transferring on the plane. I love now that you can have your device on while you land and you take off. So here's a trip that I did to Zimbabwe. So I went to Victoria Falls, but turned it into more of a Chinese landscape. All right? Got to see the elephants. Obviously, the 200mm lens came in really handy. This is a little one. Most of them are rather large. And so this is what's going to be going up on Instagram. Here's another great quick snippet of what I love about the smaller Sony cameras. I constantly have the small RX100, now version 4, with me. I was at this very out-of-the-way market in Harare. I could have probably never found my way in or out of it again. And we went to visit these men that were building a mbira, which is a musical instrument. I didn't really want to go in with the heavy gear and the big camera and the bag and the lenses and just like look at me, I've got thousands of dollars worth of stuff. Ugh. But I really wanted to be able to take intimate photos. So the little Sony, which is here on the table and that Marco's shooting with right now, really lets me shoot quality in RAW and then continue with the processing. So I really like that. And it was important for me at this moment to not have that big equipment between me and the people I was actually working with, but still have the quality. And so here you see me covered in that dust. You could hardly even see the camera in my hand. And it's no secret that I'm taking pictures, but I thought that was just really important for me in order to be able to photograph these portraits. And then base my processing off of the environment, off of the dust, off of the work that these people did for like pennies a day. So that was very special for me. I'm not going to have this conversation, okay? But that was on a bus stop, so I'm like, stop! Got to photograph the bus stop. All right? Now, one great thing I love about shooting with these cameras, obviously with all digital, you can immediately see what you're getting. So I'm doing a lot of experimentation, you know, okay, with the longer lenses, but here's a whole series of the slow shutter speeds. You know, you end up driving a lot, and so I'm always like just photographing the landscapes, and if you just saw this come up, let's say in your browser or Lightroom, you'd be like, delete. But since I've done this so often, I know what I can pull out of those images to create these more unique images. You know, walking to the Port Authority bus station, it's like, focus is overrated, so is a high shutter speed. So I enjoyed just, you know, playing with the motion. I have a tendency when it's raining in New York, you should look behind you because I am following you. Okay? So because as we know, any advertising photographer would know, the colors are just so rich. So I sort of stalk people with little ladybug umbrellas and then process them on the iPhone. It's just fun. And of course, you can see what you're doing. So this is a picture I did on Friday. This is a 6-second exposure with the little RX100. I'm just leaning on a wall, and there's a ferry going by. So I saw the ferry, I saw the light, I had one chance to get it. And so I thought that was fun. Now, how do I do this? I want to just sort of break it down in steps. So, and I know that there's other mirrorless cameras like by Fuji that you can also transfer wirelessly, but I sort of want to break it down on a Sony how to do it. So, you have to install the free app, the Sony Play Memories app, and then, surprise, you would take pictures and select them on your camera, and then on the phone, you need to make a network connection. Now, it's independent. I'm not dependent on someone else's network, which is why I love working on airplanes. All right, so there I've made this connection to this obtusely named network. That's the camera. And then I'm going to launch the app, and it automatically starts copying. Okay, so there's the picture. Then I'm going to process it to taste with my favorite apps and publish it. And so it's actually pretty quick, and then you want to repeat and enjoy. All right, now I want to actually show you a little video of me in action doing this. Oh my gosh. So here we go. Oh, this is perfect. Nice. So just towards me. Perfect. Okay. Good. I love it. So I need to thank Marco for shooting that, and for Boise and Ange for letting me drag them out of doing their homework. So that was a big help. So of course, you're photographing New York City, you never know who's going to walk into the shot. So I was like, come on in, have your picture taken with a model. Doesn't he look happy? You know? But, you know, central casting couldn't have done a better job. So that's always fun. Now, just in the last 2 or 3 days, I've been walking back and forth a lot between our East Side location and the exhibition, and I cannot walk by the Flatiron Building without looking and taking pictures. And so this is just last night, and then processing it and sharing it. And the thing that I like the most is how having a camera with me helps me see the world more clearly, and having this lens and this opportunity to share it lets me practice my craft every day. I'm taking pictures and sharing every day. And this is, I think, a unique photo. This is already, the sun's already gone down. There's like no light on the horizon. And I walk by the Flatiron, I'm like, oh yeah, it'll be nice. There's some photographers like tripods, and I'm like, oh. So I found a recycling bin, and I set up the camera to a 2-second exposure, and I took the picture. I'm like, oh, blue, who doesn't like that? And then when I processed it, all those stars came out. So that is so cool. So make sure you use your recycling bin as your tripod. All right? I was really impressed. I've never been into like astrophotography because it always sounds really complicated. But that's what the little Sony, as I call it, and an iPhone will bring out of a file, which is pretty amazing. Now, it is all about, enjoying what we do. And I'm a very lucky person. Always have your Sony with you while you drink white wine. All right? And so if you have any questions, I have to thank all these people involved in this presentation. Okay? And I look forward to the rest of the presentations. Okay. Who's next?
So Katrin, I'm curious, are New York City trash are New York City trash cans 1/4 or 3/8 thread? So as you saw, you were very limber in action, and I like that because our next speaker can give you a run for the money, because I've always known Ben Lowy is an amazing conflict and photographer and photojournalist, but I did not know till dinner tonight that he has an affection for Turkish oil wrestling. So, that's, ultimate in versatility. Are you going to show some of those images or hold that stuff out?
They might be in there.
Yeah, okay.
I will preface right now by saying I just got off a plane from India, and my brain doesn't know what time zone I'm in. So when Kayla asked me to pull all this together, I just kind of dumped whatever I had.
Yeah, I'm jet lagged flying up from Miami too. I know what you mean. So I think are we ready for her?
Yep.
Okay. So Ben Lowy, folks, straight from India.
So some of these are not taken with the Sony, and it was just to give you an idea of kind of the work that I've done for the last 15 years. This is kind of like my first assignment the day the war started in 2003. Haiti. I really thought, I was actually hiding behind a tree. I thought he was going to chop my head off, but he had no interest in me. And this is a lot of the work that I did for years. This is on August 4th of 2007, the worst day I ever went through in Iraq. But realized that half this stuff I'm wearing 35-pound body armor, and I'm carrying 2 massive, camera bodies, an audio recorder, a couple of different lenses, first aid kit, satellite phone. I mean, it's I'm going out there with over 65 pounds of gear, every time I'm shooting, and it hurts your body. I mean, my hips are about to be replaced, my knees have been, and I've had multiple surgeries. I lost all the nerves on the right side of my body during one bomb attack. So it's it gets old after a while. This was a project I did in Iraq for about 6 years of shooting through Humvee windows. And the idea that there are now these cameras that are so much lighter and in fact don't make me a moving target. I almost feel sometimes in some of the places I've been in with huge cameras, it's obviously I'm a journalist, and this piece of man meat is often confused for being Jason Bourne, and it's a problem. The good use of a night vision goggle is to stick it on top of your camera. That was just holding it on there the whole time. But so that's a lot of the work. And then over the years, I've kind of adapted. So here's the thing, I think all the time different gear is coming out, and you find a way to make that gear speak for itself. I shot in Libya for Al Jazeera, and they decided to have a satellite truck every 1.5 kilometers and bounce the signal back so they could put the footage live from the trenches. And the cameraman and I actually got an internet dongle and a router, and we made a Wi-Fi. And so we actually had the trenches on the front lines had a Wi-Fi signal. So I was able to Instagram and and Skype with like bullets flying over our heads. I know that sounds weird when I talk about it, but at the time it sounded okay. This was like Hurricane Sandy here. Again, this is like one of the things where like the gear comes in handy. Like this was on Coney Island, and you had all these photographers lined up with like 300 millimeters and like their huge cameras that are not waterproof. And I put my iPhone in a Ziploc bag and I closed it and I walked out in front of them into the water and I photographed this dude. The Jetstar. I had to like do 3 or 4 hours of chewing tobacco with a police officer and talking about body armor before he let me onto the pier to make this image. Chewing tobacco is disgusting. But then, so I went through a lot of war zone photography, and then I started getting into sports, which is very similar to war photography in many ways. It's just like, you know, be there in this moment that happens. You kind of have the same thrill. And you know, and it's for me, photography is all about bringing my own way of seeing to what I'm doing. Like, how can I show it differently? So here is your men's Turkish oil wrestling. So I do a lot of sports now because I find sports to be sort of the civilized world's answer to warfare. So instead of us going up to Boston and like throwing down, we can just do it on a field of play. And I think it's an interesting way to talk about conflict in the world. So I've been doing a lot more sports, and God, that is really fun. Had a good time out there. So now that I've moved into like using a lot more of the Sony cameras, it just gives me a little bit more flexibility in terms of how much gear I have to carry. And again, a lot of the assignments that I get are just like, Ben, go climb a mountain and like just go do something like crazy that no one else is going to do. And so having like smaller gear, lighter gear that you know, enables me to like make better images and not to get my hips replaced. This is in the Straits of Magellan in Chile earlier this year. Iceland, the iceberg graveyard. One of the things that I found interesting is that the cameras weigh so little that in like a full-on heavy knot wind, I couldn't really do actually a long exposure because the wind was blowing the A7Rs over. This is actually braided rivers. These are taken from a plane that banked sharp to the side so I could shoot out the windows. This is like straight down into rivers. So just to show versatility, can you use like the Sonys? Are they quick enough? Are they good enough at night? This is in Ferguson during all the riots this year, and this was all shot on the Sony cameras too. And it's really funny because some of the police officers and some of the civilians in Ferguson did not think I was a journalist because I had these dinky little Sony cameras. They're like, no, you can't be. I pulled out my scarf, and that usually tells them that I am a photojournalist. See my scarf. But you know, I also use the same cameras at home. So this is my son during Halloween last year when I got my first Sony. So I've really been using it about a year now. And my son's like the perfect model. He like kind of lets me do whatever I want. He's had more covers than I have, so it's fun. I do a lot of stuff like on the subway. I find like the smaller camera. I use the RX1 a lot because of the viewfinder. And on the subway, I hunch over and I look like a kind of a weird little guy taking pictures. People just kind of forget about me. And these all eventually go to Instagram anyways. This is my recent trip to India. This is the third part of my wrestling project. So this is Kushti wrestling, where I had to get in a loincloth along with everyone else and wrestle a bit. It's not a pretty sight. I didn't include that picture because you can never unsee me in a loincloth. But this is at probably 5,000 ISO at about 3/50 of a second just to like freeze action. So it's like it's fairly dark in there, and just so much going on, and so the cameras have that amazing capability when you need it. Just men rolling around in the dirt. It's kind of where I am with my life right now. Just getting closer every day. So, and then, again, it's like I do like a lot of street photography when I have the time. So this is just like in between assignments in India, I would be walking around and shooting and then transmitting straight to my phone. This is actually an interesting assignment that I had for a client where I had to shoot 12 pictures over 12 hours on World Tourism Day. And so as I shot, every hour I was transmitting from the camera to my phone to the client's Instagram account. This is this family's pet horse. One of the things that I love about my, that I deal with in my approach to photography is I just kind of sit there and wait for things to happen. And I find that if I have this ginormous camera in front of my face and I'm waiting, that people are just like, what the fuck is that white guy doing? And I used to actually fake smoke, because if I just kept on moving my hand like this, I looked like a Hello Kitty statue. And people just thought like I disappeared into the background, but like then my arm would get tired. But I actually ended up just like using the LCD screens on the camera or the viewfinder to keep like the camera lower and just kind of melt more into the background and wait for like everything to line up. So this is my my ride to the airport to come back here. So that's it. That's me.
While we get the next presentation ready, I just have to pass along a message from Mark Weir. If you were using that loincloth to hold extra batteries, you can keep them. You don't have to return them to Sony, really. They're yours now. Either one. Yeah, I hope you weren't using lens wipes or something for that, but.
Use a Sony loincloth.
Yes, so you will hear from Kenta later, but a sneak peek of what he could probably share with you is the brand new RX1R Mark II.
Thank you very much.
That's not a mouthful. Yeah, the hostess gets first dibs, but we'll put it here. He'll show all about this. But before we get to Kenta, I'd like to share the work of one of our newest Sony artisans, a wonderful photographer and filmmaker, Ben Moon, who was cool enough that not only is he cool enough to live in Portland, but he's cool enough to move an hour outside of Portland to hang out closer to Mount Hood. So I really love Ben's images, and let's hear some more about them from the author himself. So take it away, Ben.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to share just a brief amount of my work that I've shot since I've been shooting, I guess, for the last year with Sony's Mirrorless. And it's kind of changed the way I shoot and how I see things. And it has been a lot of fun. It's one of those systems, once you adapt to it. I'm fortunate to have a job that allows me to have an office that has a view sometimes. I shoot a lot for Patagonia for the last 15 years, and so this is what I used to carry around. I remember putting this on Facebook, and all my pro friends were like, "What are you doing, dumping all your gear?" And basically, I downsized into this onto a tiny little bag, but have the same quality, or not same, but better quality. My roots are in climbing photography, and to be able to see your exposure as you're shooting it through the EVF is one of those underrated things about mirrorless. It's huge. I mean, this is a backlit photo. There's a lot of light, if you're just metering off the background, you're going to have an underexposed, foreground, overexposed, everything's constantly changing. And when you're shooting things that are moving quickly, having that and capturing those moments and knowing your exposure is spot on is huge. And also when you're hanging, 100 or 1,000 feet off the deck, every ounce matters. And the fact that I can bring up 5 lenses and 2 bodies if I want, and in the same little bag that I used to have to only bring a couple lenses and be really picky about what I brought up, I feel like I can actually use the tools that I really want to have with me and not have to leave it behind because of weight. I'll also sometimes shoot photo and video, and just being able to combine all those elements together in the same package, because you can't have somebody else shooting from the side when you're up there in the shot, and so you have to do both. The low light capabilities of obviously the A7S series is phenomenal. It allows, this is in pitch black darkness, and normally you'd just see where the headlamp is pointing, and that's all. And the shadow detail that you can pull out is immense. This I shot just during a trip to Maui just for myself to take a break, and I'd just gotten the A7 II, which was the first stabilized sensor that I'd used. And I posted this photo to Instagram straight off my camera. I didn't even have a laptop on that trip, and it was by a twofold the most liked photo I ever had on Instagram. But the fact is, I shot this handheld at a 15th of a second, and without really even trying. It wasn't a one of those things where you're holding your breath and counting at 3 and taking 300 shots to try to get the one frame. It was there, and to me that's a game changer, because I really don't like tripods. They slow me down. I like to shoot things in the moment when they're happening, and it just you can't be mobile with a tripod. I took this kit to Norway the first time I really utilized it, and the one thing I noticed right away, this was just a quick hike out of camp, but I always had my camera on my neck, whereas you're carrying a heavy DSLR and a bunch of lenses, you just tend to leave it in your bag when you're on a heavy hike, just because the exertion and swinging around your neck. And to be able to utilize a camera that will just hang there and not only be there ready like a point and shoot, but it also will take quality image that 8K image it's brilliant. And then to have the latitude to actually get the detail in the water that is usually all blown out is phenomenal. A lot of people ask me how they hold up in adverse conditions. And I mean, I live in the Pacific Northwest, which is notoriously wet in the winter, and my waterproofing system consists of a small rag or lens cloth that I'm occasionally wiping off things. I don't really protect my gear at all, and I've really been really happy with how they hold up in those conditions. I think the latitude also of the files in this system is just another thing I just love, to be able to post-process. Like Katrin was saying, it's really fun to be able to pull detail out. I shoot a lot of portraits, and one thing I also love about the EVF is to be able to punch in focus magnification. I can punch in, know I have focus, I'm shooting this wide open, and know I have focus, and not, realize later that I was just a millimeter off. That's huge for me. I'll go into that a little bit more later too, but this was the first bigger job that I did with, I was shooting with a Ramadas mouse. I hadn't had a record in 8 years, and we set up this big cubicle, set up as a full grip truck and everything, and basically to be able to check focus and punch in and know I had it, and it was really funny to be full set and have a tiny little camera, but I started to love it because I could just running around with this small system, and that's a lot of pro friends that ask me like, oh, on a commercial set, don't you feel weird carrying a small camera around? And to be honest, nobody cares. As long as the image quality is there, that's all they care about. And most people, like Isaac, the front man from Honest Mouse, actually just bought a setup himself because he was so fascinated by the camera. This is my personal project. I basically love having just a a camera body and a 85 with me no matter where I go, because I just love taking portraits of the characters that I meet and those that inspire me along the way. And with the SLRs, I was always, the expression, my goal with these is to have someone open up and just be themselves. And when you're back focused on their eyelash or, just slightly off their eye, it's brutal when that's the frame you want. And to be able to punch in, check focus, and literally have their retina huge in your EVF and know you have that focus, to me has been game changer. And the fact that I can have I have a little Batiste 85 and my A7R2 in my bag all the time, and a tiny little bounce card. It's a game changer for me, because that means I can have this set up and continue this project wherever I go, and it's one that I'm really passionate about. I have hundreds of these portraits, and recently there was a video about my dog and I that kind of went crazy viral, and it changed how I see things. It was a very personal piece, and it's had 8 million views in 1 week, and it's had 11 million since. In total, and just the thousands of emails I've gotten from all over the world has really changed how I feel about sharing and just vulnerability, and how when you share something personal and do it in the right heartfelt way, not complaining, just being honest, it's amazing the response you can get. And I think we need more of that today. It's just being real, and not being so closed off and trying to make everything look exactly the same as what we've seen. And I get into this too because this was shot with the FS700. This is just a screen grab, but the E-mount ecosystem, that now I can use my my regular cameras with my video camera. So I'm also a filmmaker, and so it's so nice that my system works across the board. I can adapt any lens I need for it, but my native lenses work cross platform, all the way across from my FS7 now. This is in the Aleutians a couple months ago. And then, to my A7S with the Shogun on it, I can still film with that. And so, to me, not only is the ecosystem to have that, but I like to carry everything on with me. A lot of times I don't have a huge team for a lot of the work I do. It'll just be a few filmmakers, like a crew of 2 or 3. And so to be able to do that and have everything, all my lenses work across the board is game changer. So. And that's all I have, so thank you.
Well, Ben was going to share the images of his dog, but he needs 11 million and 1 views, so you're going to have to click on that tonight when you get back. And you touch on something that we're going to talk a lot about, is sort of the whole system working together. And we're going to get into that with greater detail. But before we do, we have one of the busiest Sony artisans. Miguel Quiles is actually, I just found out today, he's actually triplets. I didn't realize, because I see him everywhere. So it's this multiplicity thing. He's one of the busiest guys around. Beauty, portrait, wedding photographer extraordinaire, who also has tons of really great instructional videos on the web that you guys can give him some hits along with Ben's dog. So check those things out as well. But without any further ado, Miguel Quiles, thank you.
Wow, what an intro. How you guys doing tonight? Y'all enjoying this? Sweet, that's awesome. That's what I like to hear. Well, my name is Miguel Quiles. I'm probably one of the newer artisans, one of the newer people on the Sony team. I've been shooting, and actually just checked the calendar when I walked in, and this is like about a year that I've been shooting mirrorless. I had actually moved over from shooting with Canon, didn't have as much stuff as that one picture. I forgot who it was that had that picture with all the Canon stuff on the table, but it was pretty close. I had a lot of Canon gear, Canon lenses. I just moved up from Florida about a year ago as well. And part of the reason why I did that was that these cameras were so huge and they were so heavy, and just how, Ben was talking about going out and having tons of gear on your body walking around. Imagine this in Orlando, that's 100 degrees with 100% humidity, where you walk out the door and you're drenched in sweat And that's not the cutest and sexiest thing to walk into a photo shoot and you're like, oh man, I'm sweating through my shirt, because I'm carrying all of this gear. And so for me, that was the thing that kind of brought me into it. And I'll show you some of the images that I've shot in the past year. Kind of kept it slim because I want to keep my time kind of brief, and hopefully you guys can get some more out of it with questions and everything. But this is the type of work that I do. I do a lot of studio work. And as I was saying, because I was in Orlando, it was very hot. I was very allured to shooting in the studio because you got air conditioning. So I would never have to worry about going out and sweating my brains out because I had a beautiful air-conditioned studio where everybody could be comfortable and we could eat and enjoy and have fun, listen to music. But this is the type of work that I'm shooting, and it's been very, very liberating. Even now, moving up here where it's nice and cool, and I know some of you are probably like, nice and cool, why would you move up here from Florida? But the weather is awesome. It's so nice to be in an area where you can go outside and shoot if you want. And there's interesting stuff. Like, we live in the greatest city in the world. There's stuff happening right now outside and we don't even know. But it's just amazing to be able to do that. And it's amazing to take it into the studio and still be able to produce quality work. While these cameras, for many people, they might look at them and say, oh, they look like a toy. Let me tell you, they're not toys. They are serious pieces of photographic equipment. All the stuff that I was doing with that huge, setup from Canon, I'm doing it right now with Sony, and I'm even doing better than what I was doing when I was shooting with my Canon stuff. My work is getting more recognition, and I don't know if it's just because over time you get better and you develop new skills and your tastes change and your eyes change towards photography, but it's kind of weird, At the same time that I switched over to shooting mirrorless, it just liberated me. It really opened it up for me to go out and shoot anything that my mind's eye can see. And so this is, again, the type of portrait work that I do in studio. We were talking earlier, and actually bonus points for anybody who knows who this guy is. Is anybody? Yeah, that's awesome. Who said that? Awesome. I give it up to you. So one of the questions that I get all the time from people when they see me shooting with these cameras is, do people take you seriously? Can you really shoot for money? Like, can you do professional work with these cameras? And so Fat Man Scoop, for those who don't know who he is, two-time Grammy Award winner. He's done music with, Mariah Carey and a bunch of other people. Very well known in the music industry. And I had the opportunity to shoot his portraits. And I shot them with the Sony a7R II. And I got paid for it. And nothing happened where he would say, oh, I don't feel good paying you because you're shooting with this little tiny camera. That never came up. He was actually very intrigued, like, oh, wow, that's an interesting camera. And we started talking about the tech. And so I've never run into an issue where anybody has said anything to me about, oh, that camera doesn't look professional or anything like that. It just doesn't happen. And once they see the caliber of the images that you can produce, there's nothing to talk about other than, wow, those are great images. So definitely wanted to share that with you. And that's a story that's happened over and over and over again as I've been shooting with this system. This particular image I shot actually at a workshop, and it kind of is interesting, the versatility of this camera, because I feel like when I had my bigger, larger setup, I had to really think through what I was going to do. And I don't know if that happens to some of you as photographers, but you've got a person standing in front of you, and for me, I'm a very technical shooter, and so I think about, okay, well, my light has to be here, and you've got to be standing right here, and the background has to be right here, X amount of feet away, and I'm very technical about things. And I started to realize now that when I shoot with these mirrorless cameras that it's almost like the technicality for me is on autopilot. I know technically what I need to do, and it gives me the opportunity to engage with people and talk to them and try to get expressions out of them that maybe some other photographer would not get out of them. And so at this particular workshop, very similar setup to what we have here. I pulled somebody out of the crowd, and I pulled this gentleman out of the crowd and started taking his portraits and was talking to him. And I really didn't mess around with the settings. I just put the settings where I thought it needed to be and kind of hope for the best, and then started taking shots, and they were super sharp. The quality was super amazing. This has been probably one of the most well-received portraits that I've posted on social media recently, and it was at a workshop. and it was super, super simple setups. But these Sony cameras, I really feel, having done a bunch of workshops using my older gear, it allows me to not really think about the technical and just focus on building and communicating and just having relationships with people so that they don't feel weird when I tell them, I need you to do this, or I need you to look like this. And in this case, I told them, I need you to, give me your most badass look. Give me your, I don't know, what did you say to me? Or that one Clint Eastwood movie, get off my lawn. I wanted him to give me that look, and he killed it. And if I had to sit here and mess around with my settings, he would have been like, oh, does this guy know what he's doing? We would have lost that moment. And actually, this particular shot, this was one of the very first images that I shot. This was with, first images that I shot with my Sony mirrorless camera. This was with the original A7. And what was interesting about this image and how this whole thing came about was that I originally bought the camera just to shoot video. These are amazing cameras to shoot video, and one of the things that attracted me was that you have autofocus with these lenses with video, which with Canon, if you shoot Canon or Nikon, somebody has to be there to manually focus these cameras. And so I'm doing this shoot with my Canon camera. I had not made the decision yet to start shooting mirrorless for photography. I'm shooting this model, photographing him, doing my thing, and I see my camera there, and I'm like, I wonder how this would look. I wonder, because you look at the camera, and like many people, you're like, I don't know if this is a serious camera or not, but let's try it out. So I took my camera with a kit lens, and this is with the 28-70 kit lens from Sony, and I actually took some shots with the 24-70 with Canon. So I had a similar setup between the two cameras and just started shooting. Sat down on my computer, started comparing one to the other, and I was blown away by the fact that this camera setup was less than $2,000 at the time for the body and the lens. And the Canon setup I had at the time was like $5,000. And when you look at the two images side by side, I was very upset. I was upset for the sense that, wow, I spent all this money on this camera and this lens, and this is it. It's being, shown up by a sub $2,000 setup. This is unbelievable. And so ever since then, I slowly started to migrate away from shooting with DSLR and just going 100% mirrorless. Another image as well. How many of you, by chance, have actually visited my YouTube channel? Has anybody seen any of my videos? 1, 2, 3, sweet, 4, maybe-ish, 5. So if not, this particular image, I actually did a behind-the-scenes video for it. So if you go to YouTube and just search my name, you'll find my channel, and you'll see how I shot this particular image. And what's really awesome about this camera, again, is that it was just such a simple setup. It was something that you don't have to think about the technicalities of it. I wasn't worried that, oh, my camera's not gonna nail the focus. This was shot on an f1.8, which when I shot this with Canon, in order to get a shot like this, I would have to shoot 20 to get one shot that was in focus, and hopefully I'd probably have to shoot another 20 to get another shot that was in focus at f1.8 and actually had the expression that I was trying to capture. Because if you guys photograph people, you probably know how that is. You get those shots that they're in focus, but then their face is like, that doesn't work for me. And then you get the shots where, everything has to come together, in other words. And for whatever reason, with my old setup, I had a really hard time getting shots in focus. And now shooting with these mirrorless cameras, I could shoot 10 images, and the lion's share of those images are sharp and in focus. So that gives me the opportunity to work with expressions and try to get something out of them that is better than the typical stuff that I would get. But if you get the chance, definitely see the YouTube video on how I shot this. And again, another shot, very, very simple setup, another example of some of the studio portrait work that I do. I kind of wish I could zoom into this image because I don't know if it's showing up being that it's a JPEG, but if you look at the raw file, there's so much detail, so much detail. There's probably more detail than what, I'm almost nervous sometimes when I'm at the photo shoot because I'll shoot tethered and they'll say, oh, I want to see my pictures. And I'll, click on the picture and zoom into their face, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to see all that. That's too much." Just insane amounts of detail out of a camera that, again, super, super small, super lightweight. And that's probably the number one question that I get from people. They look at it and they see images and they say, is this something that you could do professional work with? Is this something that is just like a stepping stone for me to get into something better? No, you could do professional work with these images. They are completely capable. It's all up to you as the photographer. And again, another example, if you go to YouTube, you can see a behind the scenes for this as well. But again, just insane amounts of detail that these cameras are able to capture. And these are expressions, again, that had I been shooting this with a different system, as you could see, hopefully in this image, you can see she's very engaged with the camera. She's playing a little bit of a role. I kind of talk to people as I'm shooting portraits, and even if they're actors or actresses or not, I try to get them to act out a scene. And so, you know, I told her, I want you to pretend like you are standing at a bar and you see, you know, I forgot who it was who she said, but I told her, pick your favorite male actor that you would just die if he walked up to you. And I think she said Daniel Craig or something like that. So I was like, okay, so I want you to pretend like Daniel Craig is standing over there, and you're looking at him and you're playing with your hair, because girls do that. They just play with their hair when, you know, they like someone. But I don't want you to be too forward. So this is the role, the act that I want you to do. And so she's doing her thing, and what tends to happen after a little while is it gets old and it gets stale, and she's like, you know, she loses, you fall out of it. And when I was shooting with my old system, that would happen. And I would look back through my images and I'm like, okay, the first few, super engaged, locked in, great expressions. But again, shooting at some of these different settings, you would end up with images that weren't sharp or images that were soft. Don't have that issue anymore shooting with these mirrorless cameras. And the other good thing as well is that with these new adapters, I actually was able to keep all of my Canon glass in the beginning and just had the body. And I put the adapter, put the glass on there, and use the focus peaking features, which if you have not seen it, if you really want to cheat at photography, try the focus peaking features in these cameras. It is insane. You literally can sit there and look and manually focus better than you could focus using autofocus. And so just a really, really fantastic system, and it's really, really helped me with my studio portraiture. And I think, possibly, yeah, I think that's the last image because it's not going forward. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you guys. I'm glad you got a chance to see a little bit of the work that all of them are doing, because it'll make it easier for me to throw questions out there. And the very first question that I wanted to ask you guys is something each and every single one of you touched upon. And so, Katrin, I'm going to put you on the spot and throw this out to you first, because you were the first to mention it. Yes. And that's the whole idea in terms of if you're walking around with mirrorless cameras, or for that matter, an RX100 pocket-sized camera, do people immediately know that you're a professional photographer? And my thinking is, God, I hope not. You mentioned how that made it easier for you shooting on the street and not really attracting a lot of attention. Maybe you could go into a little more detail.
So I think we all experienced that. And I first started working with the Sonys about a year and a half ago, the first time I went to Cuba. And I didn't want to be like, you know, the American or the German tourist with crisscrossing cameras. And so I got the A7, and then I went to B&H and I got the brightest pink strap possible, you know, and it was perfect because there was never that wall between me and the environment. Ben's mentioned it, Miguel's mentioned it, Ben, and the other Ben. I separated you two here. And I think that that's just really important. I also am the same way with the size and the weight. You know, I kept noticing that my pictures were getting closer and closer to the car, you know, because I was just tired. And for me personally, okay, I'm the chair of more technical department. The less technical a piece of equipment is, the freer I am. You know, I don't need all that stuff in the way. So I like sort of being incognito. And I always say that, like, my dentist has better equipment than I do, you know.
Everyone's dentist has better equipment than they do.
And so, but it's just really lightened everything up. I mean, I take that that one camera that Marco's using now with the blue strap, people know me. I have it on me all the time. I literally wear it at home, you know.
Now, do you stick to the black strap for New York to blend in as opposed to the pink?
I got the blue because it reminded me of Tiffany's, you know. But I mean, that's the thing. And the thing is, I used to have like my cameras in a little pouch in the bag to protect them, and I would never get it out of the pouch in time. And now, boom, 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 because I'm following people. I mean, the speed, the size, and it's nice not working around with that heavy gear. And I just didn't like it. Thankfully, I don't have to have my shoulders replaced, but I don't want to go that far.
Yes, we all hope to make it to the age that our shoulders are in one solid place at the end of our necks. Miguel, you touched on that as well, sort of the idea of you go into a pro shoot, do the clients, you know, look at this gear and think, you know, oh my God, what are they shooting with it? You know, to me, I would assume that always is much more result driven, like, you know, what do the images look like as opposed to what's the gear look around the photographer? Is that something that you've found on most of the shoots you've done?
Yeah, you know, I've pretty much seen, and this has kind of been something that I've learned coming from the corporate world. I didn't come from the arts. You know, I wish I could have come to a school like this and learned photography and done it in a classroom environment type of way. But one of the things that I had learned back in the corporate world is that it's all about you and it's all about your personality and your character. And so when I would walk into these photo shoots, it didn't matter if I probably could have ripped out one of those little toy cameras and they probably still would have taken me seriously because of the way that I carry myself and the way I present myself. And that's something that I try to impress on a lot of photographers, that it's very important that you walk the walk and you talk the talk, and hopefully your images can back up, you know, your confidence. But that's definitely been something that has helped me out a lot. And I really have never run into that issue, but I could see people that might be tripped up by that. And that has nothing to do with the camera. You could have a $100,000 camera that, you know, shoots people's thoughts from 2 weeks ago, but you know, it's all about you, and it's all about you as the individual and the photographer being confident and being competent and being able to control the scenario and just let people know that I got this. You know, don't worry about this. We're going to take some great images. This is going to be great. Doesn't matter what I'm using. We're going to get it. And of course, at the end of the day, delivering some really, really good images.
And I think a lot of that confidence really has to do with knowing your gear, whatever you're shooting with. Mr. Moon, I'm guessing the best time to learn your menu system is not when you're hanging off a mountain with one hand and holding the camera up with the other. So that's probably not the first time you really had the camera in your hands, figuring out what it's done. Is it sort of like a musician where you need to know what the instrument will do before you have to put it to use, or how do you go into these shoots?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that everybody who picks up a different type of camera is always going to have to learn the menus, learn the settings, and get it set up for that works for you. And you know, I took a little bit of trial and error, but once I had it dialed, then, you know, yeah, I'm on the wall. I can, you know, I have to have every system in place. It's just like, you know, you have your set ready for a model to come in, or if you're filming, you have to have everything dialed in place. And so I think it's really important to just know your gear. And I think my favorite thing about this gear is it gets out of the way, and it's like once you know it, it's like Miguel was saying, it's just it breaks down this barrier that when you have a giant camera in front of your face when you're trying to have a rapport with a model, it's really tricky. Or, you know, a giant, you know, film setup with matte boxes and everything, it's like you can often have this barrier, but if you can break that down and have this gear that really diminishes that, I mean, because ultimately it's all about the story you're telling with the gear. So you're just trying to have the gear get out of the way and work really well for you.
Yeah, I saw that massive bag of stuff that you were selling. I'm not one who would want to be hanging off a mountain with that. So I think sometimes keeping it simple. Ben, when you're covering conflict and stuff, would you take a lot of gear, or would you typically have one or two bodies and a couple lenses on them and that's it?
Well, it depends on the year.
Okay.
And the client, but I would, you know, always go with probably 4 or 5 bodies, because you never know when you're gonna, you know, lose one. I've had, you know, definitely like the Battle of Fallujah. I don't have any pictures because my Nikon D2X stopped working in the middle of the battle. and like I couldn't just be like time out.
Yeah, that's also why I don't have any pictures of the Battle of Fallujah too. So,
But yeah, no, before there was video and with SLRs, I had to also have like a small little handy cam, video camera. I used to have like a separate audio recorder for like, for making all these multimedia for like the New York Times. I'd have like this whole rig on my body armor of like different pouches that would have different things on them. And it became just an ordeal to get dressed in the morning.
and a couple of you mentioned this tonight over dinner, is just the idea that some of you got into this not necessarily on the still side, but finding how easy it was to work with the video side and having one camera that can jump back and forth to both. Ben, I know it's like you probably take it to even more of an extreme with the professional video cameras. How does that sort of tie in where, you've got multiple bodies from mirrorless cameras to high-end pro video bodies, but the lenses can work between those. Does that simplify your life and give you more versatility out of your kit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's different advantages to each. And I think the other thing is, you can throw one of these on a tiny little like Ronin M or whatever, little tiny stabilizer, and hold it all day long with one hand and not be just completely, your back isn't about to go. But you throw a regular full size video camera on a a Movi or a Ronin, and you're running around with that. It's those replacement shoulders.
I think the Movi.
Yeah, I'm glad the guys younger than me are talking about replacing body parts. So
I mean, it really just the less. If I can have everything with me, and also when you have a crew of five running around and swapping lenses between, if it all works cross-platform, you don't have to throw adapters on everything. It's huge, and really you just have to label the lenses and go to town. So.
yeah. And one of the things that I've liked in recent developments is the bodies have gotten extraordinarily small. I mean, especially if we look at Sony's most recent announcement, the world's smallest 43 megapixel full frame camera, the RX1 R Mark II, that was just announced last week. And yet, what I like is I'm seeing that we're not really seeing compromises in terms of lenses. I think Sony's been very responsive to, pros who are like looking for, the ultimate in lens quality. I think that's something that's sometimes lost in terms of the love and passion that the people that I work with on the Sony engineering side have for creating great images and creating great tools for us. So Kenta, if you could talk to us just a little bit in terms of, I know a lot of recent developments from Sony have really been generated by the end user, like last week's announcement bringing out with the A7S Mark II uncompressed RAW, and it just was added as a firmware update yesterday to the A7R Mark II that really came as a customer feature request. How are you guys prioritizing, and how are you able to work these back into your system?
Yes, so I'm the product manager for Alpha and Cybershot. My name is Kenta, and just like what Brian was saying, we're very motivated, very interested in hearing all the feedback that we get from all the artisans, the photographers, the videographers. So my job in the US is to be the eyes and ears for product planning in Japan. So I'm constantly feeding back what's needed for the US market. And what's really exciting is that the US market is the #1 place to be if you want to be in visual arts. So in Japan, they really value your voice. We're always looking and watching the forums. We're always at the trade shows and listening to feedback. And recently, it's all gelling together. And I think because because we focus on being innovative, not doing what everyone else is doing, but doing something better so we can deliver a better paintbrush for you. So seeing all the imagery and the results that are coming out, it just excites us as well, and it gets us in a positive spiral. So I think right now we have a really good momentum behind Sony, and it's all these products and all the artisans here on the panel is a result of all of us working together, I think. So it's a great ecosystem, and it's a wonderful time to be with Sony. Yeah.
And now for the artisans, I know some of you guys have switched over recently from other camera systems. Did you Ben Moon, did you keep some of your favorite lenses, or was it all gone? I mean, that's one of the great things with the E-mount. I call it sort of the universal mount, because almost pretty much every full-frame lens that's ever been made, if you dig around enough, you can find an adapter that lets you use it on the Sony cameras. Were there any particular that you just could not let go of and wanted to keep?
Gradually over this past year, I think with all the, that's what I was earlier when I was thinking when you're saying that. It's like, these bodies obviously put out some of the most remarkable images, but it's having the glass is everything to me, and like I just love the different look you can get from everything. And so at first that was what I was the most leery about switching, is knowing if there was the glass to go over. And over the course of this past year, I've gotten rid of everything but just a couple like ultra wide, like the 14 or something. I basically, it's really been amazing to have glass that is native, because anytime there's an adapter, there's always like some, it's one more piece of gear. You need one more point of contact that could go bad. So honestly, when and Zeiss came on board with the Batiste 85, like that was, I just wanted an 85 that was just small and compact, that would take images like that. And I'm sure you agree, Miguel. It's like it's just to get the glass that matches that sensor is just it really is a beautiful thing. And the 35-1.4 that I saw you carrying around, that thing is just beautiful, Yeah.
And I think that's something that probably we've got a lot of students out here in the audience, and I think that's a good lesson to them, the way that you were talking about walking around with the one camera body and the 85 millimeter 1.8, which is all you really need to do portraits. You've got a certain vision. You want the images to match. You don't necessarily have to travel with like you own a lot of lenses, but for that particular look, that's what you're going to work with. And I think one thing that sometimes gets lost is the thought of like going out to shoot pictures, where you load up everything you've got instead of just walking out with like one body and a lens, sort of like Katrin, all the wonderful images of Flatiron that you saw as you're coming across, which you may not have seen if you had a backpack filled with all the gear that you have. So how much of your work is minimalist when you work on a independent project, as opposed to if you're shooting for Patagonia and you have to have every lens you could possibly need? Is that sort of a relief for you to go like, wow, I can shoot with just one body and a lens?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, obviously you show up on a commercial job, you're going to have every tool at your disposal, or a film shoot. But if I have to go hike 5 hours to get to the location, I'm going to slim it down as much as I possibly can and only bring the tools that I know I'm going to use. And my travel kit has become this little tiny bag with a 25, a 50, and an 85 in it, and it literally fits in. I can just throw it in my bag at all times, and there's no longer that, I didn't bring my good camera, I just have my iPhone or my point and shoot or whatever. Now it's like I have everything I could possibly need to produce an image that could be my favorite portfolio piece later, or I have the RX104 in my board shorts while I'm out surfing, and in a Ziploc, which I do that all the time. But yeah, that it's with you now, and that to me, it's like, you can only capture it if you have the camera on you. So
absolutely great. Miguel, you touched on something that I think is one of the hallmarks of these cameras, is the dynamic range. And I know it's like the Sony sensors are used in other camera systems as well. They actually are the most widely used sensors in the world, but compared to certain competitors that make their own sensors, it's about a 2-stop added dynamic range, which you don't necessarily see up front. But how does that help you in your work when you want to capture that detail in the shadows?
Yeah, so I think in terms of dynamic range, a lot of the stuff that I do is studio portraiture, but when I go outdoors, I'll go on location, and oftentimes I'll take my studio stuff with me. I'll take my studio lights with me, because I'm trying to, I've come up for so long not having the ability to capture that type of dynamic range, that I would bring my studio strobes and I would bring them on. out on location. But now with these new systems, I can kind of leave all of that stuff at home. Like that's one less thing for me to carry. And so I'll just bring my camera and I'm able to, you know, push these files and to be able to expose for highlights and just bring up the shadow detail and end up with images that you almost think that they might have been something that you lit off camera, like with an off camera flash, but it was just something you captured in the camera. So, you know, again, it's just about being a minimalist and just not having to take your entire life with you when you go out on a portrait shoot because you want to get quality images. You're able to do that just bringing your one camera body. And it's not just with, you know, the expensive cameras. It's not just with the A7R2s and, you know, the RX100R Mark II. You know, I'm using the A6000 for a lot of work, which is a $500 or $600 camera. And even that thing is fantastic. And you still have the ability, talking about the lenses, you know, you can get these older, you know, off-brand lenses that are, you go to pawn shops and you could probably pick them up for like 40 or 50 bucks. And they take amazing, amazing images. They might be a little scratched up, but no one needs to know. They're only worried about that end product, that end result, which is that image. And so, you know, it's not just those high-end cameras, even down to the A6000, amazing dynamic range, amazing features, and yeah, the system is great.
And speaking of minimalist, I know everyone who's out here today knows Katrin very well, but those of you joining on the interweb, Katrin is like one of my heroes when it comes to retouching in Photoshop and all things post-processing. So to hear you talking about working on your images on your phone that you've uploaded from your camera, how important is it for you? You're working in a very quick and mobile way, but how much important is it for you to have that great image quality to begin with, where again you're saying you can shoot with the 200 millimeter lens as opposed to zooming in on your phone and having no pixels left?
Well, as we all know as photographers, we learn how to see as our equipment sees. And we know, like, let's say you're an iPhone shooter, you know which images just are not going to resolve well. And so you sort of avoid shooting them. And it's the same thing with this equipment. You sort of know what's going to work well, so you capture what's going to be successful. Yeah, starting with good quality is always a good way to go. I can always blur it. I can always make it look worse. All right, and that's very important. It's sort of interesting. I process things on the phone, and people go, "Oh, I really want to print from that," and then I'm like, "Oh, now I got to figure out how to process that on the desktop." It's hard to get the same look.
I think there's a book coming up for you, is how to move from your phone to your desktop. There you go.
Exactly.
So in addition to the reach that you've got, being able to use a longer lens that you don't have on the phone, I'm imagining it also like low light scenarios and places with huge variance in dynamic range where you've got shadow and highlights and you want to hold that. Is that coming into play as well in your work?
Oh, well, absolutely. But I mean, one thing that I really like is I cannot photograph with my glasses on, but I can't see the LCD without my glasses. And I hated it. So now I can see everything in the viewfinder in the EVT. So I take a picture, I see the image right there. So my face is on that camera a lot more. I'm not doing that, people call that chimping. So, I mean, it's not quite the question you asked, but I think it's so important for like how I shoot. And like, one eye open, you're sort of seeing what's coming. And so I think that's really a big plus for me. Another thing that Ben mentioned is the ability to change the exposure and see it in the viewfinder. I mean, that's just nuts that I can actually already place the exposure where I want it to be.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question for him, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the ability to be able to really see what you're getting right away, like that you don't have to shoot the 200 pictures, like, okay, I've got it in 10, which it's just, I think that's really great. And the whole glasses thing, that's a big selling point for me.
Yeah. So I do want to come back to Ben Moon there, because you mentioned this, and people, if they're not familiar with mirrorless and some of the advantages of electronic viewfinder, I find a lot of photographers from my generation, the first time they pick it up, they're sort of freaked out because it's different than an optical viewfinder. But if you give it a day or a weekend, you start to find exactly what you're talking about, which is being able to adjust the exposure on the fly as you're seeing it, where if you're hanging off and the climber's in the right spot, it's like if you've got live view setting effect on, what you're seeing before you shoot is the same exposure you're going to capture, and you don't have to shoot it, adjust it, and shoot it again. How important is that for you in those type of situations?
Well, a lot of those situations you don't have the opportunity to go reshoot something. It's only going to happen once, and so I can't, and I like what Katrin brought up about chimping. It literally, if you're looking at the back of the camera while that thing is happening, you just missed it. And I think that for me, what I've noticed, like you said, it's at first it feels weird to see an EVF and look through that. It's unnatural looking at first, but less so now. I feel like just now that I've used it, but trying to go back after I used the mirrorless system in Norway for a month, tried to go back to my Canon DSLR, and I was just dumbfounded by this thing that just felt suddenly really clunky to me. And I realized how that had just become second nature to see basically that my exposure in the viewfinder, but also that I didn't need to look at the back of the camera ever, and I was staying in the moment. And I think that that's the most important thing with shooting photos is like being really aware of your surroundings and being aware of things as they're happening. And so not only do you not miss those key moments on the wall, but in just general, like when you're with hang out with folks. So
I'm going to change gears real quickly, because something that Ben Lowy brought up, I think is something that photographers battle with all the time, is as you're really making the transition from, you were very celebrated as a war and conflict photographer. I was a big fan of that work, and making that change to, you've got a kid, maybe that's not what you want to be, across the other side of the world with bullets zooming around you. How important is it to you to sort of find a new way to channel your energy and get the same type of joy from photography, but maybe from projects that maybe keep you a little bit more out of harm's way? Not that Indian oil wrestling is completely free of peril.
Well, my wife would just say, just up my life insurance, and then I could do whatever I wanted. She had no problem with that. I think that's more of like a maturity of self, of being able to like look at your career and understand what kind of artist you want to be and what kind of, when I first started when I was 23, I was like, oh, I want to be this like monk war photographer and like never have kids and just like be dedicated to like this. And then I grew up and I realized that there's other things in life worth documenting than man's inhumanity to man. And for me, photography now, there's a certain joy. Like I always say, like I don't take pictures, I make them, because like I actively try and use my skills to construct an image of what I see in front of me. And there's sometimes like you feel it, like when you got that image, like you feel it in your soul, like yes, you've got it. And that's the driving force in my work, is like getting to that feeling. And it doesn't matter if I'm doing fashion or sports or conflict or social documentary. I mean, photography is this amazing passport to experience the world. I sort of live in the suburbs now, and I've lived here 3 years, and I hope no one from that neighborhood sees this video, because I don't know anyone who lives in my neighborhood, because they have 9-to-5s, and I travel like 8 months a year, and then when I talk to them at like a parent-teachers meeting, they're like, oh, I'm an accountant. And I'm like, oh, I have nothing in common with you, like, because I spend my life doing different things like every day. And I love that about photography, that it's this passport to experiencing the world. And so for me at this point in my life, it's like all these things are opened up to me more than ever before, as long as you're like mature enough to look at it and say, okay, I don't need to just do conflict. Now I can do wildlife. Now I can do underwater photography. Now I can do like burly men covered in oil.
Well, and I liked how you managed to get the picture of the penguins in a foxhole, sort of mimicking some of the war photography. How much for all of you guys, I'll just throw it out, is like, I know all of your work, and I know you're all very passionate about photography, but that doesn't necessarily have to take over your life. Maybe if each of you can kind of talk a little bit about the balance in terms of, you know, loving photography, but also enjoying life. I'll start with you, Katrin.
I knew I shouldn't have taken this seat. So I'm very fortunate that I'm married to a very talented artist and photographer. And what we love to do is we love to travel and we go take pictures. And it's great how you really get to know somebody when you go on like photo walks with them, because you sort of like go apart, come back together. So I try to, you know, be a good role model. I work very hard. I'm passionate. I can talk about the 3 Fs, right? It's photography, food, and golf. 2 of those, the photography and the golf, take a tremendous amount of time. But so I'm fortunate to have a very blessed life, and it's because I'm, you know, hopefully visually literate. So I'm lucky.
You know, I think sometimes when photography becomes your job and it's not just your passion, it can sort of eat away at the pleasure a little bit when you have to think about, oh, I need to balance my books and, you know, figure out.
You met that accountant at the parents teachers things, for God's sake.
Yeah. You know, so there's, you know, sometimes like I find like when photography is a job, it can eat away at the passion you have for photography, and you have to find these little things that bring it back. But like, you know, having a hobby or having something that's away from photography, I mean, having kids. I mean, not that everyone should just have a kid, but that's been like a huge, you know, something else in my life besides.
Plus he's your built-in photo subject too.
Right,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
just a model.
right, I can see Halloweens for many years to come.
I have releases for 2 kids and 2 dogs, so it's perfect. I can just throw them in scenarios. Yeah.
Perfect. Mr. Moon?
Yeah, I mean, my photography and my life have been blurred for quite some time. I mean, Patagonia is one of those odd clients that a lot of the things I've shot have been very much just what I'm doing in the moment, and they appreciate the candid things. Whereas, like Ben was saying, it's like a lot of times when it becomes too much of a job, it becomes, I need to take a break. And I do enjoy just leaving the camera in the car at home and just, you know, enjoying the other things in life. But also, I think I just enjoy exercising my eye and letting it, you know, kind of. I feel like you need to recharge sometimes when you've been shooting a lot and just get your creativity back. And then I start to really notice how the light, you know, just noticing, going back to places over and over and seeing how the light plays. But I think in keeping the passion alive, for me, it's always been trying to find the next thing that challenges me. And, you know, filmmaking was one of those things, shooting those portraits, which I used to be so intimidated by looking someone in the face. Was much more prefer the action. I think finding something that challenges you will always keep that spark alive. And I think that I don't want to ever be bored of taking pictures. So.
Perfect, thanks. And Miguel, are there things that inspire or challenge you as well?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because as I kind of think back over my years of shooting, there was a really distinct line between photography and life. Usually photography was work, and it was, you know, the only time I had a camera in my hand was when I was working and doing something. And then when it came to life, what would go through my mind is, do I really want to bring all of this stuff? Because if I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to take an image, I don't want to, you know, forgive the French, I don't want to half-ass it. You know, if I'm going to go somewhere cool, I want to take a great image. And so I want to bring all of my gear with me. And you do that once or twice and you start to realize, man, you have this huge camera banging up against you as you're going out, walking around, and you say, I don't really want to do that. And so that line got very distinct, where it was like, if I had the camera, I was working, and when I was doing my life adventures, I didn't have a camera with me. I would bring my cell phone. And what's been interesting now is that with these cameras, I'm actually starting to bring my camera with me because it's not a chore like it used to be. I could bring high quality optics You could stick a 35-2.8 on one of these cameras and you could literally in a jacket pocket just go anywhere. So I find myself kind of that line is not there as much anymore, and I would dare say it's not there at all. I could actually go out and take photos and enjoy life and take pictures of interesting things and go back and tell people and show images to people like, hey, I ran into this really interesting person in New York, and before I would never have had an image to document that other than maybe a cell phone image or something like that. And so, yeah, it's been a very interesting thing. It's really been a liberating thing to shoot with these, and it's definitely changed my photography, and it's changed my life as well.
Thank you. And we're about to open it for questions, but before we do, Kenta, I can't let you get off the hook that easily. So one of the things, just an observation that from the outside people probably miss, is how passionate all these guys are on the engineering side and the product side for photography and the end user. And I think you have as much fun when we head off and do like a day shoot or something as well. And I understand that, speaking of photography, someone who's just agreed to do his first wedding shoot his first wedding on 4K. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah. So we're all passionate about imagery and taking videos, taking pictures. Funny story is I did go to school for engineering, but my passion has always been photography. So I did take some photography classes, but I quickly noticed that I didn't really have the eye for it. So I relied on my mechanical engineering skills and my knowledge from the technical standpoint of photography to kind of go into Sony and work on the cameras. And back then, it was a secret project. Sony just acquired Konica Minolta and was sent to Osaka to work on with this brand new team. And it was really exciting. Everybody is so passionate about imaging, and I think Miguel was talking about this, and Brian as well, but we are the #1 largest sensor manufacturer. So it kind of runs in our DNA to deliver really great imagery. So all of us, on the team really enjoy photography. We break it up by, doing challenging things, like I'm trying now to learn how to fly a quadcopter as well, to do more video stuff. I haven't been doing gigs for a while, so I recently did a wedding a couple weekends ago using 4K. So, it's always good to know the technical side, but also going through the paces of what the actual photographers and videographers are going through is really important for us too. So we all kind of try and do that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And with that, let's open it up to questions in the audience. We've got a mic here.
So I just had a question about so I haven't used those cameras, and what I was curious about is when you go to take a picture, a lot of times you have it pre-visualized what you're going to do. How often does it happen that because you're seeing an exposure before you've set it, that it diverts you from what picture you were going to take to maybe to expose it a little bit differently, because suddenly you see something that just by accident that you wouldn't have seen. Sometimes like you'll take a picture by accident, you'll see it, that actually works better than what I thought. I mean, how often does that happen? And do you find that to be an advantage, or do you find that to be a disadvantage in a way?
So for me, I get what you're saying 100%, because that was something that when I shot with DSLRs would happen pretty often. And this is probably a scene you have all the time where you take a picture and then you look at it and you're like, oh, let me see how I did. And sometimes you have an idea of what you want your exposure to be, and you take that shot and you're like, oh wow, this does look better than what I thought it was going to be, and then you just keep rolling with that. I really feel like shooting with these cameras nowadays is cheating. Shooting with these mirrorless cameras is literally cheating, because not only for, the focus peaking stuff that I was telling you before, but being able to see your exposure before you take the image, it literally is cheating. Back in the day with film, I shot film back in the day, and I remember you'd take a shot and you'd keep your fingers crossed that the exposure was the way you wanted it to be, and you'd go to the store and, wait a day or two to get your film back, and you'd get your film and you're like, oh, wow, that was a pretty cool exposure. But that light will never be the same again. So, yeah, I mean, shooting with these cameras, it doesn't do that for me. I'll shoot, and if I see something that looks different than what I expected, then I'll still keep shooting that if I like it. But still being able to change on the fly and see what that is without having to shoot and chimp. Like I said, it's really changed the way that I approach photography, and it's like a no-brainer at this point now. So,
I mean, I think a lot of photography for a long time, we were like, you know, did we have that happy accident that we were blessed by the photo gods and like some weird, and I think the cameras now are so much more accurate that you can be in complete control, like creatively, and you have less happy accidents, which maybe is a good thing, you know, in some ways, and then in other ways you're like, you know, sometimes you wish for that eureka moment where you do have a happy accident, where you don't get that as much with these cameras because they're so unnervingly spot on.
And if you haven't tried it, you have an opportunity to try it tonight. So please come on down and try it. And it does take a while. I'll be honest. It's not, you know, once you look through it, it's always going to be a little bit weird for you, especially if you're used to using optical viewfinders. But once you get used to it, you cannot go back to OVF. That's, I think, a consistent experience that a lot of people have.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, actually, my question was more for Kenta. So the sensors are excellent, and people, you know, kind of remark that maybe sometimes they're like a little less happy because the form factor is smaller, so the lenses are smaller. Can you comment on maybe like the possible roadmap for updated lenses? I know it's kind of like, you know, a hot topic or whatever, and maybe you can't comment, but I was curious if you had anything you could, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't comment on that, but you can tell
Much to
me
the dismay of people reading the rumor sites.
yeah, but you can tell me all the lenses that you want, and
You'll work on getting them?
we'll work on it.
All right, cool.
he's got a van in the back. He assembles them.
It's like
We'll
a
make it for you tonight.
Zeiss van.
Yeah, I also had a question for Kenta, which is, so you said you've been working on Alpha a long time. I've had an A300, an A580, an A99, and I just got an A7R2. And one thing I've noticed with the A7R2 is, you know, people have mentioned using a lot of manual focus and the ability to sort of zoom into focus. And I've somewhat noticed that the sensor must have such a high resolution that even the viewfinder, I sort of feel I'm in focus once I notice all of the pixelation a bit. And so as your sensors reach into these epically high numbers of pixels, you know, are the screens, the viewfinders, you know, they must sort of follow as well, I would imagine, to basically just keep pace in a way. So is that relationship something that as the sensors get higher, you realize where's the screen tech to kind of help the people, you know, evaluate the image at a glance? Is it in focus? You know, I find I actually on the 7R2, I have to zoom in to check focus, and it's almost always sharp, thankfully.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and that's something that we do focus on. And out of the two areas that you look at, the electronic viewfinder and also the LCD, we definitely put a lot more priority on the electronic viewfinder. So every iteration, we try and improve the image quality of the electronic viewfinder because that's your eye is so close to it, so it's very sensitive to, you know, the quality. And on the RX1R Mark II, I would recommend you to look at it, but the corner-to-corner sharpness is really, really good. So even without punching in, you'll be able to see if you have that critical focus or not. But if you wanted to double check, you can also zoom in digitally and see it right in your electronic viewfinder, which is also another plus, which you can't do with an optical viewfinder. So yeah, really cool stuff.
Wait, hang on.
I share your affection for the live view shooting. I do it all the time with my Canon camera. And I might be a little out of date at how good your viewfinder screens are. But that's been the problem in the past when I've looked at the mirrorless cameras, that live screen view just paled in comparison to the quality of the optical viewfinder so dramatically. So where are you at in terms of resolution on the viewfinder screens? And I certainly want to see it progress.
Sure, yeah. So resolution is up to 2.4 million dots. And if you're very good at seeing it, which I believe most of you are, you will be able to see the dot matrix. But I just say, just use it for a week, maybe even a month. Once you get used to it, you really won't be able to go back. So.
Yeah, can I answer? Because I'm like Steve too. With the first EVTs, it was like, it's like looking through a little television, or like a really bad video camera from the 90s. I hated it. And so this is sort of like the first one where like, I can deal with this. I like it. But yeah, those early ones, they were terrible.
It jumps just about every year, maybe not once a year, but year and a half. And it's been like a really nice steady evolution. But there's a lot of things that I just couldn't go back to. Even just being able to, if you want to apply creative style of black and white and shoot in real time, see in real time in black and white, I'll sometimes do that even if I'm shooting color, just to be able to see the way the light's falling. And those are the things that the more you use it, the more you get used to it, and they really do keep getting better all the time.
I'm just gonna sound like a cheerleader for an EVT, but once again, keeping your eye to the camera, I'm controlling all the menus in that little viewfinder too, which I just think is great because I can immediately, switch the metering or whatever, ISO, whatever I need to do, and I'm still have my eye where it needs to be. I mean, I think that's just fabulous.
One of the things that's interesting and takes a while to get used to is sort of when you shoot with a DSLR, that moment you're actually capturing, you don't see, because that's when the mirror is flipping up. And I think that's actually the biggest thing to get used to is when you're shooting with these cameras, you see the moment that you're shooting. So the anticipation factor that we've been training ourselves for years when using an SLR, you actually have to get rid of it because you see what you're actually shooting. And it's a whole new thing. You're like, but what the fuck was that? So that's actually the biggest thing that I felt was in the transition to get used to the electronic viewfinder, was that you actually saw what you were shooting as compared to before where like we don't.
Yep.
So.
Well, with the live view, we have for the first time in history the ability to see the images actually being made, whether it's through the viewfinder on the back of the screen.
But even on the live view with like a Canon and on the live view, you still, it pauses for a second because the mirror is still flipping up to so the curtain can go by and expose on their chip. On this, there is no curtain. It's just there. So that's actually what really takes a long time to get used to.
Already up.
Well, no, because
Well, you're talking about video. We were talking about stills. That's the difference with a DSLR. You are not going to see the moment you capture because it's popping up. So.
And actually, too, I have a question for you guys because we're talking about live view, and I think you were talking about happy accidents in the beginning. How many of you are looking to make photography your career? Hands up for those that are looking to hopefully make a living in photography.
Bad
right?
idea.
So there's some of you out there. So this is specifically for you. Those happy accidents, you cannot bank a career on happy accidents. You really have to be able to deliver consistency. That's what people hire. When you're able to take images, regardless of whether you're an amazing photographer or you get by, the way that you're able to build your career is by delivering consistency, that they know that they hire you and whatever level you're at, that's what you're going to give them each and every time. And so the happy accidents, while they're really cool for the hobbyist, for those of you that are looking to make a career in photography, this is it. Like, why have happy accidents when you can deliver consistency and build a body of work based off of that? And the live view and these cameras allows you to do that. That's why I say that, these cameras are like cheating, and I really want to drive that home, especially for those of you that, hope to make a career out of this. So.
Yeah, if you want happy accidents, grab a Holga.
You got a question in the back? Wait.
So I'm more than happy to cheat, but for guys who shoot sports, how confident are you to use this system versus your DSLR? Let's talk about the autofocus. I haven't tried the AR, whatever it is now, the A7R2.
So I shoot all the Super Bowls for ESPN, but I haven't had the chance to use these cameras in like
Chance or wanted to or confident enough? Because
Say again?
Chance or wanted to?
No, I haven't had the chance to. I haven't had these cameras when I was at the Super Bowl. But I have, like, let's say with all my wrestling stuff and with MMA, I have used these, and they're spot on. I mean, it takes a while to get used to understand the difference between, let's say, like focus tracking on a Canon and focus tracking on the Sony, and then if you're using Canon glass with an adapter on the Sony, which is what I do sometimes because there's some lenses that just don't exist yet for the Sonys. But I mean, ultimately, they're the same kind of cameras. It just takes a lot to get used to it. The biggest difference is if you're used to a bigger, let's say like a 1DX with a 300 2.8, and the way that holds in your hand, in a way you leverage the lens weight-wise off the body, you can't do that with the Sony because it's a smaller camera and the actual mount won't take the weight of that lens. So it's just a different way of holding it and like fiddling with it and figuring that out. But like with the stuff I just did in India, it worked out great. So.
I mean, I shot the U.S. Open with this, and it wasn't fast enough. It's like, and for me to get paid to do so, I'm gonna go back to another system. You know, I mean, my question is whether to Kenta, is it gonna get there?
So yeah, what we like to say is that not all cameras, there's no one perfect camera. It's going to be perfect for somebody, but it's not going to be perfect for others. We do have other artisans that do shoot NFL sidelines professionally with these cameras. But, you know, I totally understand your viewpoint. 5 frames per second may not be fast enough to be shooting NFL. But, you know, we're always definitely improving. There's so many more things that we want and so many more things in the pipeline. That's really exciting, but I just can't simply tell you right now. So.
And Sony is bringing out 97 cameras per year, so there's a good chance it'll get there quick.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question for Kenta. It's kind of piggybacks off the last gentleman's question. I noticed that, you know, like the A6000 is a great camera, has great speed. Is there any way you guys can merge the two, like the A7R II and the 6000? Because that'd be the perfect camera.
I would like you to go to Japan and pitch that idea. I think it's everyone's dream, and obviously I can't talk about future products, but it's definitely, we understand that autofocusing capabilities and fast continuous drive mode is a very important thing, especially when it comes to sports. So that's something on the table for sure.
Hi, I started using the mirrorless cameras transitioning from a Nikon D810. Using the D810, I had to have a shutter speed basically 3 times the focal length of the lens that I was using. When I started using the A7 Mark II with the image stabilization, I could shoot pictures at 1/4 of the focal length. So this is over 3 stops advantage to the Nikon. Recently, I started using the A7 Mark II and found that the pictures weren't sharp, that I had to go up with the shutter speed similar to not as bad as the Nikon, but not as efficient as the A7 Mark II. Anybody care to comment on that?
Which one were you going up in speed? You said the A7 Mark II?
Yeah, the 24 megapixel camera, I can handhold those pictures at 1/4 of the focal length. With a 100mm lens, I got very sharp pictures at a 25th of a second. With my 810 Nikon camera, I had to shoot at a 300th of a second. When I recently started shooting with the A7 Mark II, I found that those pictures weren't sharp at that.
Okay, you brought up A7 Mark II twice, that's why I'm confused.
A7R Mark II, I'm sorry.
A7R Mark II.
Yeah, the 42 megapixel.
Okay, well, I've shot with both of those and used, because both of those do have image stabilization, I found the math, to me, was about the same in terms of sharpness. Obviously, like you saw with the D810, it's the more megapixels you throw on there, the more demanding, and the smaller a blur you notice. But I was finding that the same thing, depending on lens, sometimes with a 70 to 200, if I brace properly, shooting at 1/8 of a second at 200 millimeters with the A7R Mark II. So I think one way to look at it is it will improve good technique and clean up a little bit of sloppy technique, but you still, just like before, it's like really bracing well, taking a breath before you shoot makes a big difference. But I found the two of those, as well as the A7S Mark II, because I kind of put them through the same test, to be about the same in terms of 5-axis image stabilization. It lets you cheat downward about the same amount. Probably could vary from user to user, but I'm seeing them being pretty consistent. We kind of, okay. Okay. All right. So Katrin, always being the good hostess, remind me
we go home and do their homework.
Yeah, exactly. That's where her students are going to go home and do homework. Speaking of students, those of you in New York City, come out tomorrow night for the Fuse thesis show right here at SVA. You don't want to miss that. Those of you on the internet watching this, you still have time to book a ticket into New York City so you can see that. And we want all of you guys to get a chance to get your hands on this gear and pester Kenta even more for your lens requests. So on behalf of this esteemed panel, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to SVA for the Mirrorless Revolution. Thank you very much.